how is this not a bigger scandal? The mainstream media has been ablaze this past week over a cut-up clip of Donald Trump appearing to call for firing squad execution of Liz Cheney. As insane as that sounds, CNN's Jonah Goldberg didn't even bother fact-checking this false reading of what Trump actually said, landing himself very close to a defamation charge that eventually forced him to apologize. But there's so much I want to talk about with this, so watch what Jonah said on the panel before I give you the inside details.
I don't think you even need to call it fired upon. He's saying quite explicitly and unambiguously that Liz Cheney should be shot, should be executed by firing squad. That is appalling. It is a small facet of the reasons why he's unfit for office, and the Republican Party has made a disastrous mistake renominating him. All that said, since we're here for the punditry, I don't know what this gets him, right? If his problem is freaking out suburban women who don't like the chaos, don't like the violent rhetoric and all that kind of stuff, that's just not a great closing argument. Let's execute a political opponent who happens to be a woman because I don't like her. And does that pull more low propensity voters in his coalition to the polls? I honestly don't think so.
How did Jonah get to even complete that false, lengthy monologue without even being fact-checked by the other panelists? Do you really think none of them knew that it's not what Donald Trump said and just how defamatory it is to imply otherwise? For reference, it started a couple months ago when a Republican neocon and interventionist like Dick Cheney, along with his daughter Liz, threw their weight behind the Kamala Harris campaign, falling out of favor with the MAGA crowd under Donald Trump. By the way, this is a great time to subscribe and hit the notification bell because we've entered a new political era after this election that we'll be covering extensively. I think it's truly incredible when you think about it. Trump's America first and more isolationist stance on foreign policies pushed war hawks like Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney to the Democratic camp. He remarked about Liz not long ago saying, quote, "The reason she couldn't stand me is that she always wanted to go to war with people. If it were up to her, we'd be in 50 different countries." And to make that point, Donald Trump resurrected the chicken hawk argument that's been used since the 70s to refer to interventionists and warmongers that want conflict abroad but wouldn't dare walk and talk and pick up a gun themselves.
And I don't blame him for sticking with his daughter, but his daughter is a very dumb individual, very dumb. She's a radical war hawk. Let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her, okay? Let's see how she feels about it. You know, when the guns are trained on her face. You know, they're all war hawks when they're sitting in Washington in a nice building saying, oh, gee, let's send 10,000 troops right into the mouth of the enemy. But she's a stupid person. And I used to I'd have meetings with a lot of people, and she always wanted to go to war with people. So whether it's her, whether it's Dick, I was surprised a little bit with Dick Cheney. I didn't know him at all.
How do you take that statement and mangle it up to imply that Donald Trump literally just called for a firing squad execution of Liz Cheney? That is an insane take, to say the least, and one that should make you stop and question it before you spew something like that on national television. And did you notice Jonah Goldberg on that CNN panel outright admitting that this is the first time he had even heard the statement from Trump? Doesn't that expose everything you need to know about how quick the media is to spin a narrative and other things that we may not know about? Well, Jonah Goldberg was forced to give a half-hearted apology just to save himself from a likely defamation lawsuit, but instead, he chose to do it on X rather than offering the correction to CNN's audience that he lied to. He wrote in part, and I quote, "This morning on CNN, I referred to Trump's rifles, quote, as him advocating a firing squad for Liz Cheney. I was reacting in haste to what were objectively appalling and irresponsible comments that had been framed in the setup piece in the context of previous statements Trump made about shooting protesters and having generals executed. I let my disgust at Trump's comments get the better of me as this was the first time I'd heard them." See how he dressed that up? That shows you the kind of hyper-partisanship in much of the mainstream media that can't even offer a genuine correction for an accusation as inflammatory as this. By the way, don't be thinking that Jonah Goldberg had the same level of scrutiny when Joe Biden called Donald Trump supporters garbage. So what did Jonah say? Well, he tried to imply that there could have been an apostrophe in Joe Biden's statement. I don't know what kind of world we live in if people like Jonah Goldberg are hearing punctuation now, especially where it doesn't exist. Just try and save their guy from an avalanche of deserved criticism. But did he give the same charitable reading of Donald Trump? Of course he didn't. In fact, he doubled down on his statement on X, trying to excuse the massive gaffe he made. Quote, "I sincerely apologize to Donald Trump for thinking it might have been possible that his lurid fantasizing about Liz Cheney being in the crosshairs of a bunch of soldiers might have been more ominous than it was. I guess I let myself be unduly influenced by his past statements. Again, I didn't lie, I made a mistake, corrected it well before you and your ilk went nuts, and has showed more fidelity to the truth in that one moment than you have for the last 8 years. Thankfully, someone that did take Jonah Goldberg to task for this was Scott Jennings, when he made an appearance on Wolf Blitzer's show soon afterwards.
I personally think that any fair review of this remark is really simple. He was making a crude, if well-worn argument that often comes from the anti-war left and that I heard repeatedly during the Bush years about politicians who vote to authorize wars being forced to fight in them. It's called the chicken hawk argument. It's been around probably since Vietnam or maybe before. So I actually disagree with the argument. I think it's a bumper sticker way of dealing with complex matters of national security. So here I am, a Republican who disagrees with Trump, but I'm absolutely appalled by the disinformation about what he actually said. It started with a deceptively edited clip this morning and took off like wildfire. He did not call for her to be put in front of a firing squad. That did not happen. Even his most persistent critics, some of them today, have admitted as much. I think this episode, Wolf, to be honest, goes on the ever-expanding bonfire of credibility of the hysterical anti-Trump left. And I think the people pushing this today, honestly, Wolf, are one of the principal reasons I'm going to wind up voting for Trump. I don't like, if you want to criticize this man, there's plenty. You do not have to make things up to criticize Donald Trump. And I think some of it, frankly, was spun up to distract from a terrible jobs report.
He's exactly right. And you know what's the best thing that no one seems to be mentioning? It's that Donald Trump and much of the Republican Party were competing and campaigning on the idea that they're the party that wants to stop the wars and bring world peace. That alone is a massive improvement to see that peace and what they're bragging about. And that's exactly what has led to Donald Trump and people like Dick Cheney and his daughter to fall out of favor the way they have. In fact, it's an interesting insight to see them now going to the Democrat camp, perhaps because that's where their interventionist philosophy on foreign affairs is better channeled. The Kamala Harris campaign had welcomed the endorsement of Dick Cheney, saying, quote, "The vice president is proud to have the support of the vice president Cheney and deeply respects his courage to put country over party. Donald Trump isn't a warmongering neocon, so no matter what other critiques he deserves, that's at least one improvement over what the Democratic Party has been and has demonstrated over the last 4 years." Not just that, Donald Trump's falling out with Dick Cheney and his daughter have also been a large part due with the Republican Party's outreach to the Muslim voter base, especially in places like Michigan. Trump said something similar about Liz Cheney at a recent campaign rally right before the election.
They want to get the Arab American vote. They want to get the Muslim votes. So she picks Liz Cheney, whose father virtually destroyed the Middle East, right? I don't think it's working out too well. You know, it's interesting. If you give, Liz Cheney, she talks big, oh, I want war. She always wants war. Every time I was with her in the White House, we should attack this nation, that nation, nations that people never even heard of, we should attack. She's a big tough guy, she's a big tough one. She's a tough one. But if you gave Liz Cheney a gun and put her into battle facing the other side with guns pointing at her, she wouldn't have the courage or the strength or the stamina to even look the enemy in the eye. She wouldn't have. She sits back in Washington, oh, we ought to go and attack Iran, Iraq. We're going to attack everybody. That's why I broke up with her. All she wanted to do is go to war with everybody. Because she, like Kamala, is a stupid person. It's easy for her to say she wants to start wars from the comfort of her nice home or her father's lavish home that he got from killing a big portion of the Middle East. You know that, right?
And yet, both of these net positives being Donald Trump's outreach to religious minority groups as well as his advocacy for peace are turned on their head when someone like Jonah Goldberg makes a completely tone-deaf conflation like this. And that's perhaps just one instance of why the legacy mainstream media has completely lost the trust and viewership that it used to have. Let me know in the comments if you agree and share this video across your social media because this is a difference that we need to keep in mind as America enters a critical post-election era.